Hi, thanks guys so much for having us today. And I'm really excited to solve this issue, which I think we could probably do in about 20 minutes, right? So I wanted to launch right into it because I think the most interesting thing that we could probably do in this session is discuss what kind of ethical issues have come up for you guys while you've been doing the really tense, important reporting that you've been doing for the last couple of years. And I wanted to start with a question of, which I think is something that we'll be talking about the next couple of days a lot, is how is this conflict different? Both of you have done a lot of war reporting before, both on different phases of this, but also in other countries. And does this feel different from an ethical standpoint? Have the ethical issues that have come up been different for you? And if not, that's also fine. Tom, do you want to start?
Okay, so I guess I'll just go into it with one of the things that is different that I think we can mostly all agree on about the Russia-Ukraine conflict is that, so take the Afghanistan conflict, which I covered last year, it's, in a sense, it's a lot of quite bad people fighting a lot of other quite bad people, whereas in the Ukraine conflict, it's very different in the sense that there is a very clear aggressing power and there is a very clear aggressed on nation, which is Ukraine. Now, we can go into some of the difficulties and some of the, whatever the internal problems that Ukraine had, or whatever the Ukrainian army may or may not have done wrong. There is absolutely nothing that could have in a million years justified the horrors that Russia has perpetrated on Ukraine, not just since the 24th of February, but going back to 2014 as well.
Nastya, what do you think?
I just want to start that I'm coming here just to sit under the lamp, and because it's warm here and there is mobile connection and Wi-Fi and hot water, and it's very comfortable to be here. But also it's very warm to be here because all of you, it's very nice that I can see and hug so many people who I didn't see from the beginning of the war, because every one of us somewhere, I don't know where we are all. And that's why I thank you, Jakub. Sorry for this beginning. When Jakub started, I just remember how he was invited me to Sarajevo conference. It was in May 2019. And only we had election that time, and Zelensky won this election. And Jakub sent me some video, some small piece from the serial Servant of the People. I don't know if you know about this serial. It's a serial which made by 95 Quarter by the company of Zelensky. He was comic, that time, and it was some funny story from this serial, and we were laughing about this, how this guy became our president, and my presentation was something about that. And now we are here when we have full invasion war, which I covered from 2014, and if we are talking about, I don't know, differences or ethical moments, now I am journalist. I was editor-in-chief of Hromadske in 2021 till 2021. And I decided to quit because I was mother at the time. I was mother of 6 months old boy. And I decided that I can't do these two jobs, like be a mother and be an editor-in-chief. And I decided to quit. And when I saw that this full invasion will be, I came to Hromadske again, and I say I will be the war correspondent as I was in 2014, because I have experience. I will do this. And the big ethical question for me is how I took my son, my husband, my 2 cats from Kiev in 5 o'clock in the morning, and took them into the car and went to my parents' house in Ivano-Frankivsk, and they are still there, all of them. and just back next morning to Kiev and began cover the war again. And the big ethic question for me was, I just need to be a mother with my son. It's dangerous even here in Ivano-Frankivsk because it was airstrike also on the airport in this city. But I thought that no, I should come back. I should do my job. And actually, from that period of time, for 2 months, two times a month, I'm going from this city in western part of Ukraine to Kharkiv or to Mykolaiv. It's like 1,000 kilometers. I should cross by train after I meet my team, and we are going by car to the front line, and after we are there and come back. And sometimes I think if I do something wrong or something good, because my son will be the 1st January 2 years old, and sometimes I don't see something very important about him, and it's dangerous also for them be there, but I try to do this, I try to move on in all this situation. My father-in-law, he is on the front line. Actually, he is now in the hospital in Kherson because he has problem with lungs and stomach and everything, which I don't know, 90% of soldiers have now because of all that happened there on the front line in trenches. A couple of my friends already killed on this war. They were fighting from 2014, and now in 2022 they are already dead in this war. And we were without electricity, heat, warm, hot water, and everything for 40 hours last week. And sometimes my ethic question is: should I write in my social media this word like "yobana rusnya," which can translate like "fucking Russian" when I hear air strike siren, and my son is already asleep, but it's a right strike siren, and I understand that he will wake up. And or when I have no electricity connection, mobile connection, and Wi-Fi, and can't walk or even can't prepare breakfast for my son. And I don't write this. I don't write in my social media these two words, and try to be objective. But of course, it's quite hard to be objective and to stay, I don't know, in somehow normality in all this situation. Well, sorry for so long response.
That's basically what I wanted to dig into a little bit more, because the traditional style of war reporting was always based on this concept that you're supposed to be neutral, objective observer, right? And Tom, you mentioned that there's a sort of clarity to this war that there wasn't in some other ones, but also the fact that as a member of the public, you're being targeted by the same kind of things that Russia's targeting civilians with, right? It's hard for you to separate yourself as a journalist because you're not actually outside of any of the other things that are going on. You know, you don't have... Journalists are supposed to have a special status where they're not attacked by either side, where they can actually remain outside. But in this conflict, there's a degree to which that's not possible. And I guess that's also always the case when you're reporting about your own country, that you are somehow also involved, but both as someone who knows maybe people who are fighting, but also as a parent, as you mentioned. So,
sorry, can I add? Sorry, it's very important. Pavel Penionjik may be somewhere here. He's a Polish journalist, and sometimes we are going together somewhere on the front line. And we were with him in Liman before the occupation. It's a quite big town in Donetsk region. Now it's liberated, but it's quite hard there, and it was under the shelling attack for several of months, and many buildings are destroyed. But it was May, 1st of May, and we were there, and we came showing evacuation from the town. And we should find, we should find the policeman who should make this evacuation. But we came and nobody was there except people, except just people from Liman, and they were waiting for evacuation. But there was no buses, nothing, and it becomes shelling. shelling attack, artillery shelling, and what we just what we did, we just ran to our car, and that's all. And what I saw that time, how I run, and people stay, and I try to save myself, but people just stay under the shelling attack. And this is also my question for many times on the front line. Should I try to help people, or should I do my job, and that's all? I always try to do my job, because you can't do both things together. Sometimes it can happen, but not very often. But it's very hard to understand that you try to save and people just stay under big danger.
But this is really like the old question of war reporting and war journalism and conflict reporting, is that you come into situations where actually maybe you are in a situation to help. You're not supposed to, though. You're supposed to say this neutral observer. And in other areas of journalism, there has been this awareness and kind of growing awakening to the fact that the idea of the kind of neutral observer is kind of bullshit. It's not really real. You're always having a separate identity that influences how you see events, and there is no such thing as kind of being the total outsider who has no experiences and is totally innocent and will not be able to bring their own history, their own who they are into reviewing things. Tom, you said that there's like this clarity to this war as well. I want to ask, is it time to reevaluate what the role of war reporters is? Is it possible or actually even desirable to be totally objective and have a complete outside role?
So I need to start with saying the obvious, which is that as a foreign correspondent, I'm not tied to the land of Ukraine in many ways that local Ukrainians are. For one, I have the extraordinary luxury that if I want to leave the war, I do not have any family. I don't have the absolutely terrible worry you must have of waking up every morning and wondering whether your children are safe or whether you're going to see them again. That's not a pain I can come anywhere near to saying that I've had during this war. And so my experience will always be different. And I don't think, actually, that level of attachment to one country, or in this case, one side, necessarily means that you cannot do balanced and objective reporting. And I was going to use an example from my own work during the war to analyze that. So one of the report that I'm probably best known for doing during this war is actually a report on a report, when Amnesty International in, I believe it was in July or August, came out with a report basically slamming the Ukrainian army, accusing them of committing war crimes because of where they were positioning their troops during combat that they were having in Kharkiv and in the Donbas region. Now, I was actually, by a complete fluke, in the situation that I was with them when they were doing their reporting in the Donbas. I remember, for instance, one thing that was at issue was that there was a school in Bakhmut. Now, I'm sure most of you know, for those who don't, Bakhmut is currently where the absolute worst of the fighting is going on now. This was at the end of May, so it was when we were covering Lysychansk and Severodonetsk. It was still very, very bad. It wasn't quite the apocalyptic sort of World War I scenes that we see now. And effectively, what had happened is that the Ukrainian military had used a school that was long out of session as a temporary base after one of their barracks had been destroyed. Now, Amnesty International came out and they said in their report, this is a clear violation of international human norms, it's a potential war crime, they're putting civilians in danger by doing this. Now, having been in Bakhmut, I could tell you one thing, and that is, first thing that they said was wrong is that this is actually not in any way a war crime. And one of the reasons it's not is that if you're a military and you have cleared a building and a building around it, you are perfectly entitled under international humanitarian law to use that as a base of operations. The second thing was that they said that, well, they've also failed to evacuate civilians from the surrounding area. Now, as Nastia was pointing out earlier, there are some cases, and I've seen, pretty horrible scenes of this in places like Bakhmut or Lysychansk or Soledar, where I was about 6 weeks ago, where people will simply refuse to leave from their homes or from wherever they are no matter what you try and do, no matter what sort of exhortations people give them to leave. And in some cases, they've just accepted death. In other cases, they've got family members who they can't leave, who they need to look after. And at some point, a military in the area just needs to go, look, we've done everything we can to evacuate you. And the Ukrainian army have tried to evacuate people from these areas. I've been on these evacuation runs myself, and I've seen it. And what we know happened is that the local branch of Amnesty International came out before this report and said to them, look, you've gotten all of this wrong. There's all of these different things that you haven't understood about the Ukrainian position. And they said, well, no, we're actually not really going to take your views into account. They published the report, and they published the report in order to say something along the lines of, well, look, you know, we've attacked the Russians for their crimes in Bucha or in Mariupol or wherever, but we also, to be even-handed and balanced, we need to attack the Ukrainians as well.
That's the both sides thing, right?
Yeah,
Trying to show,
exactly.
okay, we're being neutral.
And they actually, ironically, by trying to do this sort of objectivity, neutrality to their reporting, damaged their own reputation for impartiality, because they went and they twisted the narrative around the Ukrainian side just so that they could have something negative to talk about effectively. And so this is a case where I thought actually the local perspective, which presumably would have been the most, tinged by emotion or bias because of their position. They actually got it right, whereas the international organization, in this sense, got it almost entirely wrong.
I mean, that's where you could also fall on the line. I mean, what we at Unbiased the News say is we want to be truthful, not neutral, right? Mm-hmm. That we want to reflect what's actually happening, not try to pretend that we're not biased. But Nastia, what do you think? Is it desirable to be unbiased or to be objective when dealing with, I mean, we're in a situation where also we're talking about war crimes, things like that, torture, and is it possible in a situation like that to stand out and be an objective observer and not be moved by it? Or is that even not something that we should aspire to?
I also thought tomorrow morning about my feelings and about what I'm writing about and what I'm not writing about and what I'm talking about publicly and what I'm not talking about publicly. For example, yesterday I wrote something that in Kiev it was small cafe. They prepared mostly soups. And they said in their social media that it's the last day of their working because they can't work anymore in these circumstances, in this situation, because there is no electricity. And you know what's happened there in Ukraine. And I wrote them something about this, and I felt like how I feel bad about this and how hard it is for business now, everything. But another thing was happened also. That was airstrike in Zaporizhia region in the maternity hospital a couple of days ago. Maybe you saw this in the news. And 2 days the born child was killed in this maternity hospital. The boy was only 2 days live, and the Russian was killed him. And I was not writing anything about this, but I said that why I'm not writing about this. On the one hand, because many news are about this in New York Times, everywhere, not only in Ukrainian media. But also because I can't think about this, It's for me as a mother, as a don't matter, as a human being, it's so hard to think about this. I can think about some cafe which close, but not about the child, And it's about war crimes also. For example, about me, I tried not now to do these things because sometimes I don't know how to manage with this. But for example, we were in this town Liman after liberation, which I was talking about, and many just corpse, many dead people were just on the streets, mostly Russian soldiers, but it's also how all of us think about death now. It's something so, I don't know, so obvious, so something so, I don't know, normal now. It's crazy how we can say about this, but it's like that. And of course, we need to have some reflection about everything which happened with us. But for me, it's impossible now. I try not to think about what I'm doing, like very deep. I'm just doing it. That's all. It's my psychological, I don't know, stability, just to move on and do my job, and that's all. Not think about this, because when I try to think about this, about all these crimes, I become just. I don't know. I can't walk. I can't do anything.
Yeah. So I mean, what I would add to that is, in one sense, to be impartial or objective when you're doing war crimes reporting doesn't exist. But there is a sense that in some ways you have to emotionally disattach yourself from the situation. So we were in the Kherson region just a couple of weeks ago. I'm sure you're all keeping up with the news from Kherson, but one thing we're finding is that unlike in Bucha, where there was one town where a large number of massacres took place, there were a lot of killings, but that these killings, rather than taking place in the main city, actually took place in a lot of the smaller villages that were nearer to the front lines. The Russians, for example, might think that someone was a spotter for the Ukrainian military and they would just have them killed. And one of the things that you just find yourself there, I was in one of those towns and we came across, for instance, women who said they'd been victims of sexual abuse by Russian soldiers. We also came across men who said, look, one of their brothers had been killed, and just a couple of days ago, when they'd been searching the area, they'd found his body that had been dumped in a swamp. Now, this was in Mykolaiv region, and in some cases, the Ukrainian army or police still haven't picked up these cases yet because they're still working on demining the area and making it safe. Now, you can just simply state those facts outright, and you're being neutral and objective, but the facts, I think, speak for themselves about what's really going on in this war.
I mean, it's a challenge. I've been to a lot of sessions on kind of mental health and trauma in reporting, and how also doing this kind of work is traumatizing for journalists. And one of the things that can also happen is the problem of, which I think you see sometimes in European reporting on the migration crisis, for example, is that there's sort of a dull effect after a while. People have seen so much, they're not able to report on it in an empathetic way anymore because they've seen so many horrible things, So there's that problem as well. But I think that one of the things that makes this whole thing different as well is that there's this extremely sophisticated misinformation campaign coming as well. Normally, as a journalist reporting on conflict, you're instructed not to rely exclusively on the reports of governments and militaries. But in this situation, you have people that you talk to on the ground, of course, but you also have intercepted telegram call conversations. You have videos that seem like they could or could not be true. How are you guys ethically figuring out what are the sources that are the most reliable when there's so much misinformation flying around? I mean, particularly from the Russian side, but how are you able to kind of figure out what are the sources that you really can trust and that you'll repeat to your audience?
So the approach I've taken in this war, I mean, there are a lot of people who do excellent work combing through whether it's Russian telegram channels or intercepted calls or anything like that. But that, in my approach, has basically been that I'm not the open source intelligence guy. Unfortunately, to my detriment, I don't speak the languages well enough to do the work of kind of reading those sort of sources. So it is by talking to people on the ground, really, that I do, I'd say 95% of my work on this war. And one of the interesting things I've found about militaries is that all militaries, including the Ukrainian one, they'll try and bullshit you occasionally. We just know that that's a fact. However, the closer you actually get to the soldiers on the ground who are fighting on the front lines, this is why it is important, why going to the front lines is not just an act of bravado. One of the things is the closer you get to the front lines, the more they are open and honest and will tell you the real truth about their situation with you. This is actually one of the reasons I think we were quite, me and my team were quite early to the fact that Severodonetsk was going to fall. We reported it actually before, a couple of days before British intelligence came out and said that they expected it to fall, or that the situation was looking bad. We were talking to soldiers who were on the ground saying, look, we've been able to hold so far, but we're really, really getting absolutely pounded, and unless you send, more weapons, more artillery faster, we're going to lose this part of Ukraine, at least temporarily. And so, I mean, that's normally where I get my sourcing from. I'm sure there are ways to elevate it and to synthesize the different materials, but I prefer just talking to people on the ground as much as I can.
The same. I try to write only about that I saw by my own eyes. If I want to figure out something, I'm trying to go in there and just have a look. And this is my advice to everyone, because sometimes, it's quite interesting. But sometimes you ask people about the same situation, about the same place, and they have different opinion and different feeling about what's happened there. And you should understand how people are, reflect to some situation, that people, because one can describe you that it's horrible there, everything under attack, and another one will say it's okay, like normal, normal, it's okay. And sometimes you should go. Of course, we try to do this by ourselves, but I have some sources from. I have many sources from the military underground, of course, because I'm a Ukrainian and I'm working as a journalist in Ukraine with war topics from 2014, and of course I have many contacts. This is the first contacts. Another one, it's many of my friends, journalists. I can't say that I read or believe in some media, but journalists, yes. I know dozens of journalists who are making great work, great job, and they give truth information, and I know that they try to figure out everything, and I believe them, and I call them, and I ask them what's happened there and everything, because you should know so many things. Even, for example, I planned a trip to Bakhmut after this conference. And even you should ask, what's happening in Kramatorsk? Does the hotel still work or no? And you should know so many things just to have a normal trip somewhere and to do your job normally.
Do we have time for one more? Yeah. So another thing that's just kind of this, from the ethical standpoint of war, there's been a lot of accusations of war crimes. I guess you guys have witnessed some, but there's also the accusation of genocide. There is the possibility that there will be one day when these things come in front of some sort of international tribunal or something, which has happened before in conflicts. Typically, you mentioned Amnesty International, human rights groups are the ones that are tasked with sort of putting this evidence together, but there have been situations in the past, during the breakup of Yugoslavia, for example, where journalists were the ones that were on the front line that had the evidence that was used. Do you feel yourself in some kind of role or duty to collect evidence of what's happening, or do you feel that that's not what the position of a journalist in a conflict zone? Tom, maybe?